Good morning, everybody. This is the compliance briefing for BAA requirements for steel fabrication. We have folks here from Southwest Steel Fabrication. We have Nick McLean. Say hey, Nick.
Howdy.
All right, straight from just the outskirts of. You said you're in the metro area for Kansas City, right?
That's right. Bonner Springs is just outside Kansas City.
Super. And I'm Dave Lowe. I'm the GovBrief host. We're welcoming you here today. And we have a bunch of folks coming in from many different agencies because this is an interagency briefing. So we appreciate all of you being here. If I missed your agency, I apologize. But we try to catch everybody on the registration. So we're glad that you all are here. A quick disclaimer, this event is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. And all participation is voluntary and is no commitment for you to buy from anybody, including Southwest Steel Fabrication. But we do appreciate you guys being here so that we can dialogue on BAA compliant issues. And if you have any questions or suggestions, you can open up that panel on the right-hand side and you can put those in as a comment, as a text, so you can send those directly to us. You can also raise your hand and let us know that you would like to participate. If you called in on the phone, you need to enter your audio pin so we can unmute you so we can have that dialogue. And if you want to email us, there'll be an email that's available to you throughout the presentation, which is govsupport@swsteelfab.com. So that's where you can email us throughout the presentation or after. And one more thing, if you like the way that we are appearing to you visually via video, you can make us bigger by dragging this bar and you can make it larger, or you can make it disappear altogether because you have that flexibility. We will be talking today about the initiatives and regulations. We'll talk a little bit about infrastructure programs because we know that this is something that is coming down the pipe, or at least we hope so, as we look at BAA requirements for steel. And we'll talk about issues in meeting those BAA requirements because of some of the sources for the steel and how that rolls down into steel fabrication requirements, and get into some best practices for fabrication because it's a direct result for being able to meet those requirements. Get to some Q&A from you and talk about protecting your agency and making sure that you're getting what you're supposed to get to. The other thing that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be asking some polls, and you can participate in multiple ways in dealing with the polls. So tell us why you are here today, and you can pick, I think, as many as you like on many of these polls. So I want to learn more about BAA compliance. I expect projects that will require BAA steel. Or you may have a current project with BAA steel requirements, or you're interested in hearing about steel fabrication best practices, or you happen to know that Southwest Steel Fabricator does great work and you want to come and support them as well. So you can let us know about those. I think it's only one in this particular instance. So you can let us know about that, and then we will be able to share this information with everybody. And you can give you a couple more seconds to be able to do that, and we'll close that poll, and then we share the results to let you know we're all in this together. Want to learn more about BAA compliance, and then you have projects, or you're interested about steel fabrication best practices. We appreciate you all voting on that, and you'll have the ability to do that throughout the presentation to keep you involved, and we appreciate that. So with that, Nick, tell us a little bit about Southwest Steel Fabricators and how you came to be.
Happily. We are a long-time steel fabricator founded over 100 years ago in the Kansas City, Missouri metro area. We work on all varieties of steel projects, from structural to miscellaneous, commercial, civil, military, et cetera, et cetera. Some of the more difficult work we do is for the government on locks and dams, on various other civil infrastructure type projects. We're AISC certified, which is the quality organization for steel fabricators. And we also employ some of the more effective manufacturing programs such as theory of constraints and lean manufacturing, which we'll talk about a bit more later in the presentation.
That's one of my favorite topics, by the way. Theory of constraints is a very good process management for manufacturing, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's good stuff. So appreciate that. And your federal projects, you mentioned earlier, you have Army Corps of Engineers, a lot of work there with the dams and locks. Anything that you'd like to highlight? When you worked on the Gateway Arch, that's kind of cool, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's been several years. I mean, most recently, a lot of the projects that we've done for the Corps have been related to locks and dams. I don't know if the folks on the call know this, but the locks and dams on the waterways are aging. A lot of them were designed for 30, 40-year lives that are well beyond that, and it's gonna bring to a halt a lot of the transportation of goods. And I don't think a lot of America really understands how much of their products flow on the inland waterways.
Yep, there was a project down in Kentucky that I knew about with Army Corps of Engineers with the dam there. So there's a lot infrastructure all the way around, right? I mean, you have bridges, you have dams, you have a lot of things that need to be repaired, and it's good that we can address these things. You did work with the White House as well. That's pretty cool. And NASA's rocket assembly, that doesn't get any cooler than a rocket assembly. That's all I can say. So we appreciate you being here to do with those. Yep. And we're going to be talking about some of the initiatives that are coming down the pipe. Obviously, the Buy American Act is in the news since January. It actually started back in 1933, and it dealt with being able to drive business, especially federal business, for manufacturing and assembly in the United States, and also to employ American workers. So that was the overall mandate. Since then, there's other government efficiency mandate and executive orders and more to come for being able to get the infrastructure up to speed, and also aggressive use of BAA compliance for steel. We see that because of what the president did early on in January. Just a high-level overview of the Buy American Act. It deals with identifying products and construction materials mined or produced in the United States. So the cost of this needs to exceed 50%. So if you're doing improvements on that, there's also requirements for improvements, especially with steel, and they won't apply or qualify if they don't meet these standards and generally treat it as foreign. And the executive order that was signed by the president on January 24th dealt specifically with steel. It was applied to the pipelines, but it also applies to other products and the infrastructure projects that are coming down the pipe. It gave a 25% price protection over TAA compliant steel. And we'll talk a little bit more about TAA compliance in just a minute. But let's talk about the Buy American and a Hire American Act that we're seeing. So it is a clear requirement dealing with iron and steel across the board, and it starts with the melting stage all the way through the fabrication components as well. So it provides immediate enforcement for current projects and future projects. So if you have an existing project, there may be implications there as well. And they're also driving this to minimize the use of waivers. So the heads of the agencies are going to monitor for this, and they're going to make recommendations and determine the impact on domestic jobs and manufacturing in order to determine if there should be waivers that are presented for these things. And they're going to develop new policies along the way, and they're going to report back in 150 days, which puts us in the middle of September is when you're going to see this report back due from the department heads. And that is September 15th exactly. And specifically, they're going to assess their compliance with BAA laws, including the exemptions and the waivers. This is an important part because up until now, all the exemptions and waivers have gone as if they were made in the United States to all TAA compliant countries. It's no longer going to be that way because they're calling out specifically back to Buy American products if it can be done. So they're going to develop those processes and to maximize the material produced in the United States, and they're going to report directly to OMB, the director of OMB, and the Secretary of Commerce, their findings and the recommendations, which are then in turn going to be turned into, we would assume, additional executive orders or removal of executive orders because all of the TAA compliance actually rolls out of the president's office through Office of Management and Budget. And that is exactly what we're going to be seeing here. So the impact of this is going to be pretty large. Let's see about this. I think I did that already. So we're going to get, let's talk about what you have seen out there in the language of contracts so far. Have you used or seen BAA language in a contract like we're talking about here? Have you seen that start to change? And many folks have seen this, and when we talk to contracting folks throughout the United States, we see this being the case. So let us know if you have seen or used, if you're a contracting person, for that, because we have folks from industry here as well. We really appreciate you being here as well. So let us know, and we'll give you another few seconds to be able to vote. And with that, we'll let you know. So look at this, folks. 69% have seen this happen or used the language. So either used it as a contracting officer or have seen it from industry side. So we appreciate, thanks for joining us in those. It makes a big difference. So the BAA and TAA requirements in contracts. So let's talk about TAA, how that started. So TAA gave the president the authority, again, president, the authority to waive BAA requirements. So we have seen that some of these are no longer being waived, right? So certain requirements or certain procurements, and this gets passed on, the authority gets passed on to the USTR, which is the U.S. Trade Representative. Now, the USTR then has the ability to waive these on behalf of the president and has given these to 39 countries, including most recently Taiwan, but dealing with NAFTA, and we hear stories about that, as well as the Israeli Trade Agreement Act, which is another way where they have presented waivers as if they meet the BAA requirements through TAA. So what happened, though, in January was that it addressed specifically steel, and it does have wider implications. It actually flows into other things like furniture and other components that are not steel-oriented that we've talked about as well in other briefings. So with that, what is your issue with BAA compliant steel? Let us know if it's about verifying that this is one of the key issues. You can vote for more than one, I do believe, for this one. No, for this one, it's still only one. So verifying that it's really U.S. steel. Is it the cost? There could be a cost differential, and especially if you're already involved in a project, right? What about the quality issues? Are you concerned about quality, or is it the delivery timeline for U.S. steel, or something else? Let us, and we can contact you on those. But I believe most of these will fall under the verification and the cost. I'm not sure, but let us know what's on your mind. And with that, we'll come down to another 3 seconds, 2, 1, and appreciate you guys. Look at that, 54% verifying, and the other one dealing with the cost differential, right? So that becomes a significant thing, especially even if you have 25% price protection, you may still have a problem with your budgeting issues. So with that, we're going to be talking about 3 different components in dealing with issues with BAA steel: cost, quality, and the delivery turnaround. And that's why Nick is here, because he is an expert when it comes to fabrication cost management, verifying the quality, knowing that it's coming from the right place, and minimizing the delays and turnaround. Because when you're dealing with a construction project, those are the key pieces, right? The quality and delays. So let's talk about this a little bit from the standpoint of fabrication cost management, and how do you do that when you're dealing with making U.S. steel products? How do you do that?
Well, thanks, Dave. As I mentioned earlier, one of the core philosophies at Southwest in regards to managing costs is the implementation of TOC, or the theory of constraints. And I'll let you read what's on the slide, but really, when you think about theory of constraints, it's about identifying a bottleneck and doing everything possible to increase throughput at that bottleneck. So let's say that you have a saw process that needs 30 minutes of maintenance every shift. Well, this is an easy example, but instead of doing maintenance when you could be producing, maybe you do it on lunch or a break. The idea is to increase uptime, increase the number of parts through the machine so that that bottleneck is no longer a bottleneck, and you move on to another part of the production process.
And I want to call out this book because this is kind of where the theory of constraints actually started, right? Is the goal.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And those of
Great
you
book.
go ahead. Great book, by the way.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, great book. There are a lot of very interesting concepts in there that aren't necessarily intuitive. So you read through them, you think, wow, that doesn't make sense. But then you read more and you think, wow, that's a really great idea.
And
some of the theory constraints is manufacturing philosophy, but when you look at lean, they're similar but definitely unique.
Yeah.
Lean manufacturing, one of the, and Dave, if you can put that next fold up for me. Lean manufacturing, one of the core principles behind it is the concept of reducing or eliminating waste. That might be wasted inventory, it might be wasted movement, it might be wasted space, et cetera, et cetera. One of the key tools to try and eliminate waste is to implement one-piece flow. I'll give an example. Okay. If you think about traditional manufacturing that has, let's say there are 3 different processes and you need to produce 10, at what has been done historically is that you have all 10 that go through the first operation. So 10 go through operation A. After operation A, there's a pile of 10 that then moves on to operation B. Those 10 then move on to operation C. And after all 10 are through operation C, that product is considered complete. One-piece flow is a little bit different. Instead of completing all 10 through operation A, you just complete 1 through operation A, move it to operation B and complete the processing there. Likewise, moving it to operation C and completing it there. The unique aspect is that even though it's for a lot of humans, it's more intuitive to want to produce all of one thing before moving on to the next. But if you get into it and you see some math, which I won't bore you with here, you can see that the lead times, the inventory are all decreased while simultaneously increasing quality. It's just a really powerful concept.
And one of the key pieces for that one-piece flow all the way through the end is that if you don't do it that way and you have a mistake somewhere in the middle, you have a whole bunch of wasted components at the end that have errors and that create a problem.
Well, no, I mean, Dave, I mean, that's a great point, but it also brings up one of the key challenges to lean manufacturing, but also at the end is a good thing. What a lot of manufacturers do to try and eliminate the negative effects of a breakdown or whatnot is they just load the system with inventory. Well, sure, that helps you. That allows you to not feel the effects whenever something goes wrong, but that just loads up costs. That increases your inventory. Mm-hmm. It increases the amount of time it takes to produce a product. At the end of the day, adding inventory, all it does is add cost and uncertainty to the project. There's some challenges. There are some real maybe heartburn, if you will, about going to one-piece flow because you're eliminating that inventory. But at the end result is that you're producing much more quickly and absolutely with much lower costs.
And tell us about this other part, because this is kind of how you approach it at Southwest Steel Fabricators. Is you have a flat organization as opposed to a bunch of hierarchy, right?
Oh, absolutely. There are very few managers at Southwest. Whenever we're working on a project, typically the drawings or the estimating or some of the pre-work for a project, it goes to our chief estimator. He might have some help, be it drafting, be it estimating certain parts of the project, but after he's signed off on it or after he gets the drawing, it goes directly to the shop. I mean, one person and it's in the manufacturing shop. I worked in manufacturing organizations where it's going through not just 5 or 6 different people's hands, but it's going through 5 or 6 different functions before it gets to the shop floor.
Mm.
You know, if that's how an organization wants to do it, that's great. But having a flat organization, it reduces head count, helps us keep our SG&A costs in line, and helps us reduce them, as well as it dramatically increases the pace of communication between, you know, the sales efforts and also what's going on in the factory.
Excellent. And that's why, I mean, you've been around since 1910, and things have changed a lot in manufacturing since 1910. So being able to adopt these and make those changes is what's made you very successful at what you do. So verifying quality, let's talk about that, because the goal overall is the right product, the right quantity at the right time, and that is sometimes very difficult to do.
Oh, it's almost always difficult to do, but that's the standard. You know, we think of a perfect order as, you know, what that goal is, delivering the right product, right quantity at the right time. The only one I've left off here is at the right price. You know, but we addressed that in the previous slide.
Yeah.
You know, in thinking about quality, it's interesting because sometimes whenever you will talk to folks, if they say they have a quality issue, the first recommendation, or the first thought that they have is to get a new piece of equipment. You know, I'm like any other person. You know, sure, it's fun to buy a new piece of equipment. It's kind of like buying a new TV or buying a new car. Who wouldn't want to do that? You know, what I've seen though is that oftentimes a new piece of equipment is purchased instead of taking the time and dedicating the resources to understand whether or not the processes and procedures underlying the manufacturing process are in place. You know, what we found is that spending time on the processes and procedures is more beneficial. And after we understand that, then we make the decision as to whether to buy a new piece of equipment. You know, a great example of this is some work that we subbed out to another steel fabricator. We subbed it out to them because we knew that they bought a new piece of equipment that we were also considering, and we just wanted to, you know, see how it would work and get a feel for whether or not that they would be a lot more competitive than us in terms of lead times and cost. Mm-hmm. Well, we got back, and that's the last project that we will ever do with them, because we had to spend so much time on rework and whatnot. And that just goes to show you that we've got the processes and procedures in place, and those other companies, even with, you know, the absolute newest equipment, haven't spent that time. And at the end result, the end result is a lower quality product that ultimately costs more as well.
And here's this next one, talking about the mindset of the employee base. That is, I love it. First of all, I love being able to look at that from the. So what do you mean by that as far as your employees, and what is the mindset that you want them to have?
Well, really, it comes down to having an employee base that cares about making a quality product. Whenever we have welds or various other types of you know, fabrication processes that must be performed on a piece of steel, you know, typically, if anything, we weld or fabricate to a higher standard than what is required. You know, again, going back to some of our competitors, I mean, we've had to, whenever we're slammed, if we have something that, you know, has to get out and there are no objections to subbing that out, you know, we'll use other folks around town. And I mean, the challenge though is that sometimes we'll get it back. We'll just have to, we'll take delivery of it and immediately have to send it back on the truck because the welds aren't up to our standards. And, you know, again, that I'm not saying that, you know, it is not a situation where, you know, some of those folks don't have the skilled workforce to do it. It's just taking time. It's you know, having the attention to detail, and at the end of the day, just caring about the type of product that you want to get out. And that's why I'm so proud and really honored to work with these folks here, because they care what goes out. It's a source of personal pride that they produce the quality products that they do.
And we've seen enough of that where that isn't the case, right? We see it everywhere. We see the mindset
Everywhere.
of being terrible in many instances. So, and right the first time, every time. And I, when we talked about prepping and we were prepping for this, this was one of the places that I found was very refreshing. Um, 7 habits, measure twice, cut once, right, or something like that. So tell us about how you manage getting it right the first time and the impact of that on your overall deliverability and cost control.
Well, it really comes down to a combination of the two bullets above, looking at the processes and procedures as well as the employees, and also again going back to even earlier conversation, looking at or implementing theory of constraints and lean manufacturing. When it comes to what I mean by right the first time, every time, more it's about an anecdote that we've heard from U.S. Army Corps of Engineers inspectors that we've had in the plant, and what they've told us is that they wish almost all of their projects were with Southwest, because in recent memory, every single project that we've had them come in and inspect, it has passed the first time. And that's good. I think that's good feedback, but it's even more powerful whenever you hear the second half of their statement, in that none of their other steel fabricators that they inspect have gotten it right on the first pass. So here Southwest is, we always get it right on the first pass, and our competitors aren't getting it right ever on the first pass. And I just think that's a great compliment.
That is a great compliment.
Prove that what we're doing actually is producing positive results.
So just to recap on the quality process and procedures, not necessarily equipment, make sure that the mindset of the employee base is in support of that quality, and that gets you the right the first time, every time. So that's a beautiful thing. So how do you minimize delays and still have flexibility in your process? How do you do it? What's your process?
Well, really, when it comes to minimizing delays, flexibility is the name of the game here. And how does Southwest have flexibility? Well, there are really a few different ways. One of those ways is that we have redundant manufacturing cells. So if, for example, a common initial processing step for a lot of steel on commercial construction projects, or let's just say an office building or whatnot, is to saw the steel. Well, we have multiple saws, so that if a machine goes down, for example, if we have a very high quantity or a very large project, we can send that steel down, any one of different manufacturing paths. Or also, where it really helps sometimes is we'll get a call from a customer, not necessarily in a panic, but certainly in a tight spot and needing steel very quickly. What we can do is we can divert product that's already on one saw or whatever that process might be, and get this rush order onto a different saw and be able to make up a lot of time and get the product to that customer, because we don't just have one path through the shop, so to speak. Contributing to this also is our cross-trained workforce. We have folks that have, or most of our folks work on every single piece of equipment that we have in the shop. So, for example, if we have Joe that isn't able to show up due to an illness or whatever, Sam can fill in, even though he wasn't supposed to work on that process that given day. It contributes to the flexibility of the shop by having by being able to pick one person from one area, put them into another cell or manufacturing process, and really have no delays, because that person has spent a lot of time there and is fully competent in manning that cell as well.
And you mentioned this earlier with the flat organization, being able to pull these things through at a greater pace. And a lot of that, again, goes back to theory of constraints, right? All these pieces are outlined. If you want to understand more about manufacturing processes and what to incorporate into RFPs and language, it is exactly theory of constraints, lean are two areas that you can really focus. So with that, let's ask this question. When do you expect a steel fabrication requirement? Some folks have it happening right this minute, which in the government, Q4 is right now. So, or in the near future, which is Q1 and 2, which for the federal government is starting in October. And then sometime later in 2018, or once infrastructure projects are funded, and as the federal government, as you know, the federal government goes through a rather interesting funding process. So let us know what you have on your plate, and we'll make sure that we have information for you for exactly that purpose. And with that, we're going to give you, so we can stay on time here because we have some questions that we want to get to. So gear up your questions after you vote on the poll, and then we will give you another 5 seconds, and we'll make sure we get as many folks in this as we possibly can in the questions as well. So with that, we're going to let you vote 1 more second. You can do it. You can. And boom, there you go. So with that, it's split across. Let's look at this. There's a bunch of work that's happening throughout these. So we appreciate. Thank you very much for participating in those. That makes it better for everybody. So with that, we'll get to some questions. If you have any questions, you can open up that panel. You can raise your hand. You can text it to us in the bottom there and submit those to us, and we will get to those as soon as you do. So let us know if you have some. So let me open this up real quick, and we'll ask some of those questions. All right, will the slides be made available? And the answer is yes, we will make the slides available. They will be part of the follow-up process that we send out. You'll actually get another link to the video as well as the Q&A. We'll follow that up, and we'll let you know. So here's one. How can you tell, Nick, how can you tell that you're buying American-made steel? How can you tell?
The easiest, well, not necessarily the easiest way, but the way that will protect you from liability the best is to demand material certs from your fabricator. That should not be an issue. That should be acceptable and understood from any fabricator that you're working with.
Okay. And do you provide girders?
We on girders, we will set up a joint venture with manufacturers, with another manufacturer to supply those. For a very large girder project, we're not able to handle that internally, so that's why we set up a joint venture.
So okay, so you team on those. So what's the largest that you do? What's the, from some folks that aren't from the steel industry like me? How would you describe what you guys normally do?
Well, I mean, we typically think about the largest projects in terms of tonnage, and the largest project that we've done in the last couple of years was 3,000 tons. Sometimes the work that we do for civil jobs is smaller in terms of tonnage, but higher in terms of labor hours. So, for example, if we're working on a project for the Corps, for example, that's, let's just call it wall armor for a lock and dam. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is going to be in the hundreds of tons in terms of total tons for the project. So that's kind of the range, hundreds of tons all the way up to several thousand tons.
Okay. So we're working on a project that was released last year. Does BAA apply to us? It might. I'd have to look at the contract of that. And if so, can we get pricing adjustments? You may be able to. I'm not sure about that, but I think the best thing to do is see if you can shop the BAA compliant companies to make sure and see what your cost differential is, because what would you say the difference is, Nick, on the difference between BAA compliant steel or U.S. steel versus foreign steel? Price-wise in the fabrication process, what's the difference in price and the outcome?
To be honest with you, I don't know, and the reason for that is because I never get prices for foreign steel. We only buy domestic steel, and we've been buying domestic steel for so long that I don't even check the prices anymore, to be honest with you.
Interesting. That's awesome. So what is the cost of steel in fabrication?
Right now, we're looking at, for beams, we're looking about probably 38 to 40 cents per pound.
Mm-hmm.
For tubes, we're looking at about probably upper 40s, low 50s per pound, upper 48 to 52 cents per pound for a tube.
And how does that apply to the fabrication versus the actual steel cost in percentages?
That's a tough question to answer because every project is so unique. So for example, on a typical commercial construction job that's, let's call it an office building or a warehouse or whatnot, the steel might be as much as, on a given project, it might be as much as 50% of the total project cost. On any work for a bridge or a lock and dam or something that's much more technical in nature, steel as a percentage of the total cost is probably going to be in the 10 to 20% range.
Okay. That's very interesting. And if you have any other questions, you can let us know. I don't see any other hands raised. And I have one more. Is BAA compliance applicable overseas? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer to that question. So we will find out, and we'll get that information to you for that. And again, you can always email govsupport at swsteelfab.com, and we will also include those in the Q&A. But thank you very much for those. So why push for BAA steel? Well, it meets the new and upcoming federal mandates. It meets initiatives for BAA and the guiding principles for BAA. It's easier to verify quality standards because you can actually visit the place, right? And better chance of minimizing delays by finding the right kind of vendors. And it actually employs American workers, which is a great thing for all of us, actually. So we appreciate that. And staying out of hot water, be sure to be BAA and TAA compliant. BAA is obviously the hottest thing right now. Inform your general contractors. If you're a contracting officer, make sure that that the GCs know of BAA conformance. There's a lot of GCs that are on this briefing right now, and then verify the vendor claims. And you mentioned it, that there's a certificate of where that came from. Is that how that works, Nick?
Yeah, whenever you're buying steel, you can request material certs from your supplier to essentially verify the country of origin.
And verifying those, it doesn't sound complicated, right? To be able to request that.
Nope.
And just make sure that they are as they should be. And choose quality vendors. Obviously, that is what everybody's looking to do. And sometimes it's difficult in some instances to be able to identify those. And that's where you can find quality vendors by verifying the lead time first before you start, verifying the past performance, your CPARs, and especially being able to make sure that they have good past performance. And if you're in contracting, being able to establish and use BPAs, especially now as you get near fiscal year end, gives you fast access to vendors and minimizes the turnaround. I'm not sure how much of that applies to the steel industry. It's just a great contracting methodology that you can utilize in order to be able to get to your things faster. As far as procurement options for Southwest Steel fabricators, they are BAA compliant. They're a small business. There's their DUNS and their cage code. If you need to order through specific vehicles, whether it's GSA or you need support for service disabled, woman-owned, Nick mentioned it before with joint ventures, being able to do things properly and do them and be able to meet your small business as well as other set-aside requirements. And with that, we'll have one more poll for you, which is, I need help with, is it a specific fabrication project? Is it BAA compliant project? Is it BAA compliance questions, maybe? A federal contract question or something else? Let us know. We'll be glad to discuss whatever it is that you need. Do our best to be able to get you what you want. And let us know what you need the most help with. and we will make sure that we get you that information. And with that, we're going to give you a follow-up in just 1 second, and we'll get you out of here, I think, right on time or very close. So with that, we'll give you another 5 seconds. You can do it. And again, we do appreciate your participation, and we'll close it out there. And we don't even need to share those. It's about 75-25, so you know. And real quick, just to keep everybody on time, you'll get a follow-up email with a presentation, the Q&A, supporting documents. We'll get all the rest of everything that you need in order to, in the questions that you ask. Southwest Steel Fab capabilities as well as the procurement options that you just saw, and any additional documentation that you have. And with that, we're going to let you go. Thanks for joining us. Nick, any parting comments for the folks that decided to join us this fine Tuesday morning?
I just want to thank everyone, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions, even if it's not about a specific project. Love to be a resource for you.
Awesome. And we appreciate you being here, Nick. A lot of good information that deals with theory of constraints. Highly recommend anybody that's in this to take a look at that as a program and incorporate that into your contract verbiage to look for companies that actually do use that. It's an incredible thing. A lot of, as Nick said, counterintuitive type of thinking in that book. So we do appreciate you joining us. Thanks for spending your Tuesday with us, and we will see you next time.